Hello everybody, this is Oakley and he is already 6 weeks old. So for this video, I'm going to be talking about my labor and delivery story with this little guy right here. So before I start my birth story, I just want to say I don't know exactly how long I was in each stage of labor for because the process all happened so quickly for my body. I really didn't know how dilated I was till I got to the birth center. So there might be a few things I'm leaving out when I tell my birth story because I don't know like exact times and everything like that for how long I was in each stage of labor. But I do remember most of it. What I do know for sure is by the time I got to the birth center, I was already 10 centimeters dilated. So from the time that my water broke at home to me actually delivering him was about 7.5 hours. It took about 2 hours to push him out. So I'd say for counting the time I lost my mucus plug the night before, which we'll talk about, from the time I delivered him, I would say it would be about 18 hours altogether for my labor. My due date was June 10th. And I know with this being my first pregnancy, I was expecting it not to be on time. Most first babies aren't. So I ended up delivering at 41 weeks and 4 days, which was on June 21st. When I hit the 40-week mark, I wasn't feeling so great. I kept getting the false labor, like the Braxton Hicks contractions, lower back pain, a whole bunch of things. So I was doing these natural remedies that I looked up online and that my midwife told me to do to try to get him to come. So I was exercising, walking a lot, swimming, bouncing on my birthing ball I had, just a whole bunch of stuff to try to get him to come and induce labor. On June 21st, around 12:30 a.m., I finally lost my mucus plug, so I knew I was going to be meeting him within the next day or two. At that time, I didn't know I was in early labor, just because all the Braxton Hicks contractions I have had before, I thought it was kind of false labor, the pain I was feeling, because right after I lost my mucus plug, I started cramping. So I ended up going to sleep after I lost it. I was still pretty tired, but I was cramping throughout the night, and at the time, I didn't know I was actually sleeping through my early labor, and I had no idea. So the contractions I was having, they weren't really consistent, so I didn't really know I was in labor. When I woke up that morning, I did my normal morning routine, ate breakfast, got ready, things like that. So after I did that, I actually went back to sleep because I was still pretty tired. So I ended up sleeping for like another hour or two, I'd say. And then I woke up, took a shower and everything, got ready. And then my contractions actually started getting more consistent then. After I took a shower that morning, I did bounce on my birthing ball a little bit and did some more exercises. And after I did that, I felt him drop lower. So around 10 a.m., I had texted Josh to come home from work. At that point, they were getting more consistent and stronger. And my mom actually told me at that point I was in labor. So we texted him, had him come home. He came home. For about 30 minutes when he was home, I started feeling a little bit worse. So I got more nauseous and I threw up. And right when I threw up is when my water broke. We ended up calling the birth center and they told us to go ahead and come now since my contractions were getting super close together. And the funny thing is, during that time when we were getting ready to go, Josh was already in the middle of making a sandwich prior to that. So on the counter on a plate, there's literally just 2 pieces of bread sitting there waiting to get the sandwich made, so it was pretty funny. But we ended up packing up everything in the car and heading to the birth center. On the way to the birth center, my contractions got super close together and I was in a lot of pain when I was in the car. It wasn't very comfortable kind of just sitting there having contractions and I couldn't really move. So it was the longest 15-minute car ride ever. When we got to the birth center, we got there around 1:20-ish. So when I got there, we went back to the birthing room. They had me get comfortable. We got settled in. I had got my swimsuit on because I was going to get in the birthing tub. But before I did that, they checked me to see how dilated I was. And I was already 10 centimeters dilated when I got to the birth center. So I couldn't believe it. I was in shock and they were in shock. Now, before I got in the birthing tub, I don't remember for sure if they tried having me push after they checked me or not. I don't really remember, but I do know when they did tell me to push and I tried, they wanted me to hold off a little bit because my cervix lip was still over his head. So they didn't want me to damage or tear it. So they wanted me to wait a little bit, even though I had the urge to push. So I got in the birthing tub and kind of just did my labor in the tub, was breathing through my contractions and everything. With each contraction I had though, I ended up throwing up with every contraction. The midwives told me it's actually very rare that happens. It's some kind of reflex. I forget what the name of it's called, but it happens to some mothers during their labor and delivery. They did give me an IV and some popsicles to stay hydrated since I was throwing up so much. I really didn't feel like eating, so that really did help me a lot. They did offer me some nitrous oxide to use to help with my contraction pain, and that really didn't help much. They really give it to you just to take the edge off and to kind of help a little bit, but I ended up not liking it. I took a few puffs. It didn't really taste good. It wasn't for me. It didn't really help the pain much, so I ended up not using that at all. So I realized while I was editing this video, I didn't explain what nitrous oxide is. So for those of you that don't know what it is, it's what they give you at the dentist when you get your teeth pulled. It doesn't put you to sleep, it just kind of makes you feel loopy. The dose that I tried at the birth center was very low, so it didn't even make you feel loopy at all. It just kind of takes the edge off a little bit, but it didn't help me. I ended up just dealing with the pain and the contraction and was just breathing through them. The birthing tub did help with the warm water, and I was constantly in and out of the tub because I decided I didn't want to be in there too much, so I would get up, walk around, go to the bed. I would constantly be back and forth all around the room doing different things, so I got tired of being in one spot for too long, and I eventually just did not want to be in a birthing tub anymore, so I completely got out of the tub. And they said I could actually sit on the toilet backwards facing the wall, and it helps when you have the urge to push, helps with pressure and everything, and you're not going against gravity. So I ended up doing that for a good while. After a few hours of doing all that, I had the urge to push and I could not help myself anymore. I had to push him out. So I ended up getting on the bed and I started pushing, and when he was crowning, they could actually see all his blonde hair. They could not believe how much hair he had. We tried a few different ways to push, and then after a while of pushing on the bed, I decided I did not want to do that anymore. I wasn't really getting anywhere. So I got on the birthing stool to push him out, and it was so much easier because I wasn't going against gravity. So I ended up doing that. I remember one time when I was on the birthing stool and I went to push him out, they could see his face, and they actually put a mirror down there so I could actually see his face as well. And when I saw his face for the first time, it was the most beautiful thing. After they saw his face, they wanted me to give one really big push so they could get him out. But they ended up having to rotate his head. So the midwife that was delivering him and my boyfriend Josh, they actually had to rotate his head because when he was coming out, his elbow was like this on his head and they didn't want him to tear me. So they ended up doing that, but right when they were turning him, he shot right out and nobody could really help it. So he came shooting out, and Josh and the midwife both caught him together. So it was kind of cool that Josh did get to catch his son. But the midwife did say she's glad that he was there to help catch him because she didn't think that she would have been able to do it on her own because how quickly it happened. But yep, he did come out pretty quickly. So after that, they put him up on my chest for me to hold him, and they helped me get back into the bed. So we laid on the bed for a little bit, did some skin to skin, and Josh laid next to me. As Oakley was laying on my chest, they covered him up with a blanket and just kind of cleaned him up a little bit. After about an hour of all that with skin to skin and everything, I finally delivered my placenta, and after that was delivered, Josh got to cut his umbilical cord. After that, they took him and were cleaning him up and took care of everything that he needed. And while they were doing that, they were cleaning me up as well. So they cleaned me up and took care of him. And one of the birth assistants actually cooked food for Josh and I to eat. So we ate that, and while I was eating, I was breastfeeding him. We did some more skin to skin together. After I ate, I ended up giving Oakley to Josh, my mom, to hold. They did have to stitch me up. I had a 3rd-degree tear with how he came out so quickly with his elbow. So they ended up stitching me up, and they did Oakley's footprints on the wall at the birth center while they were stitching me up. So it was so cool watching that. After the midwives made sure Oakley and I were okay, they had moved us to another room next door, a nice clean room so we could sleep for the night. We had the option to either stay 24 hours if we wanted, or at least 4 hours by law after delivery. So we ended up staying the night and we left the next morning. So we left around 9 a.m. the next morning, but we wanted to stay the night just to sleep and relax and get to enjoy him a little bit before he came home. So that's my natural birth story. The midwives at Heart to Heart Birth Center were so happy with how well I handled my labor and delivery, with it being my first time. They said I did an amazing job and were so proud of me. I had a great natural birth experience there and it went so well. And I actually thought going into birthing him that I was going to be in so much unbearable pain that I couldn't handle it, and I really wasn't. The only thing that really hurt, in my opinion, was the contractions. When I pushed him out, it really didn't hurt. It was more of a relief. It just kind of burned a little bit. My body knew what it was doing, and throughout that whole process, I just listened to my body and did what I needed to do, and I think that helped my pain a lot as well. I kind of worked with it. I think also being in that environment as well with midwives and like the natural birth, that also helped ease my pain as well. I wasn't really stressed much. I'm so proud of myself for being able to do this all natural with no epidural or any pain medication. So thank you so much for letting me share my birth story video with y'all, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!